I think it is actually rampant in our culture now. And there are many things which we, probably most of us, consider good, which when really examined may not be good at all, may be portals into levels of evil. One of the most extraordinary descriptions of evil in the Bible, in the ancient world, is the phrase angel of light. And it sounds so promising, that angel of light. The word angel is thrilling, full of mystery, of beauty. Think of all the Christmas cards, think of all the carvings in cathedrals. Think of that marvelous feeling about guardian angels. And whether people believe in angels or not, the very people even who don't believe in such things will still send cards with angels on them and have a feeling, a good feeling around pre-Raphaelite paintings or medieval paintings, and recognize the sheer beauty and mythic power of angels. And light. What do we need more than light? We couldn't survive without light. This world would be dead. Nothing could grow without light. Angel of light. So powerful, and yet so dark, paradoxically. Because that phrase is used to describe the work of the devil. So what is that work? To appear marvelous, to appear beautiful, to appear alluring, full of good things, full of wonderful promise, massive social reform, scientific advance, medical advance, everything you can imagine that might be good in the world, something that brings people together, something that causes great pleasure and joy. All of those things can be summed up in this phrase, the angel of light, that you may be drawn in. I'll give you a particularly dark example of this idea is in 1930s Germany. It's easy for us to look back now. You look at Riefenstahl's films about Hitler and those extraordinary kind of rallies, you catch something of this. But it's easy to look back and sort of demonize Hitler, if you like, and just say he was all bad, or nothing could have been more evil than Hitler in the world, and that may be true. But for the people of Germany who were oppressed, who had suffered from the Treaty of Versailles after the First World War, who were in economic chaos, desperate for a new kind of national pride, for hope, Hitler was an angel of light. He seemed so positive. A great many Christians in Germany were taken in, to their huge and eternal shame. Many of them spoke about this subsequently. Because there were good things happening, the economy, there was possibilities, there was a new start for Germany, a new identity, a very strong and powerful sense of Germany being a country on the move. Underlying this, underneath all this, was terrifying doctrines, anti-Semitic horrors, the Holocaust, everything you can imagine that we know about the Second World War. But you think, how on earth did a whole nation get captured? And you could give 101 reasons for that and that susceptibility, but human beings are vulnerable to angels of light. You see it in small ways where people are led into a relationship that is entirely destructive. But it starts beautifully, it starts with promises. And many dramas, many novels are about this, where somebody effectively becomes like an angel of light to someone. And you see this in extremism. And for some young schoolgirls from Britain, for example, ISIS seemed like angels of light, these revolutionaries who are talking about a caliphate, a kind of pure Islamic state. These girls looking for romance, looking for some ideal to follow, for an idol to worship, they were led astray by angels of light who are fundamentally dark. So I think even the name Lucifer, which we associate, of course, with Satan in the biblical account, means the bearer of light, the carrier of light, Lucifer. And you can't really understand the power of evil without understanding this cloak of light. So it's not as if evil declares itself, hey, I'm evil, I'm the worst thing in the world, which is why certain kinds of horror films or certain kinds of dramas, which are about serial killers or whatever, they don't really touch the depths because they don't show how attractive or charming or seductive, how much apparent light there is around the evil person. They almost give the game away from the outset. This woman is awful, is terrible. So one of the things that needs to happen, I think, for people is to greatly increase sensitivity. It's like antennae. I remember a line in Shakespeare, by the way, which is beautiful about love. It says, love is more soft and sensible than are the tender horns of cockled snails. So a truly loving person or a love relationship is something that is even more sensitive than how a snail will just jumps back into its shell. But the antennae are incredibly sensitive. And love is like that. But so should our spiritual awareness be, that we should be extremely aware and on the alert towards angels of light. Because I think it is actually rampant in our culture now. And there are many things which probably most of us consider good, which when really examined may not be good at all, may be portals into levels of evil. And in a way, the worst elements that you would see in hardcore pornography start with the idea of genuine sexual attraction or the idea of pleasure or something appealing. But you wouldn't be caught up in society as an individual with evil very much at all if it was obvious. So I think that's a very interesting thing that, for example, if you want to see significant moral influence that may be of a detrimental kind, don't look at horror films, look at comedies. Look at the most lovable and affectionate and wonderfully written and brilliantly funny comedy series. Because in there you will find lots of ideas, lots of assumptions, lots of forces at work that are highly seductive. And you don't realize until you've watched a whole series or you completely gorged yourself on many series of the way your mind is subtly being changed on all sorts of moral issues or all sorts of things you're starting to accept which you might not have done if you'd really thought about it. I tried to make this point to the director of the BBC once many years ago, and I've had interesting connections with people in the BBC and so on, and I remember that he couldn't see my point. He really couldn't see it. Because I said, it was at a symposium where I said, we should be talking about comedy. In terms of, it was a symposium about morality and the media. And he just couldn't see my point. One of the phrases he used about, he liked to use about people who were always complaining to the BBC. This is usually religious people, of course, or uptight people who write lots of complaints. He would call them moral pessimists. That they would be writing, complaining about the language or the violence in a straightforward episode of EastEnders or something, missing the fact that some very important social issue was being dealt with, which it often is in these great soap operas. But my point to him was, look, we shouldn't worry so much about moral pessimists. We should worry about moral optimists. I said, because if you want to see the darkest side of the 20th century, it is a history of moral optimism. That's what was happening in early 1930s Germany, moral optimism. That's what was happening in communist Soviet Union. Moral optimism was assuming that somehow the whole Marxist theory, the whole communist state, everything was going to work ultimately for the good of the proletariat, whereas millions and millions of people were dying of starvation under Stalin. Moral optimism infected a lot of British intellectuals who got caught up in the 1930s, some of them even becoming communists, some of them even becoming spies for the Soviet Union. Moral optimists. And again, you saw this a lot in the 1960s and 70s. And even now, when I listen to commentators talking about our culture, I will sometimes, this is the angel of light territory again, I will think, moral optimist. People, for example, and I've heard some leading figures politically and socially say it's much better to be alive today than 20 years ago, because everything is getting better. I heard that said by a very senior figure and a world figure in 2016. Well, nobody would have said it in 1916 because that was the Battle of the Somme. So nobody would have argued that things were getting better then. But 2016, and I thought, well, he was saying no child would be better alive, 20 years previous in 2006. The world was. I said, well, wait a minute. And if you think about it now, wouldn't a Ukrainian child, wouldn't a child in Gaza, wouldn't a Syrian child, wouldn't many people be better off in 2006 than they have been in the last 5 or 10 years? Obviously, the world isn't getting better. In some respects, it may not be getting worse, but, that is moral optimism. And the danger with that kind of approach is it's on the edge of the angel of light. Everything's great. It's all good. Don't be so pessimistic. Things are going really well. Just think of medicine and look at the wonderful way that we're curing cancer, unimaginable advances. And you hear that about AI all the time. Or just think about the number of breast cancer screenings you could do in a split second. All you hear are these positives and moral optimists. And there are plenty of them in Silicon Valley. You need some skepticism. It may not be moral pessimists, but you need some skeptical thinking. And therefore the great thinkers, in my view, the great writers, George Orwell was one of them, are people who wrote 1984, of course, An Animal Farm, who exposed many things, a writer like that with great, extraordinary purity of intellect. We need writers who are able, and artists and thinkers who are prophetic and skeptical and have a very, very sensitive pair of antennae as regards the angel of light.